Hi, New Dance Stars. I am so happy to present you Anna Lopez that I know since 2017. I get to know her in the real life, but she already was a star and I was nobody, so she does not know me, and it's okay. I got to know you at the Canada Salsa Congress. I think I saw you on stage. So yes, I got to know you in Toronto. You are the World Salsa Summit Champion 2015.
Yes.
Then, just like I told you before the start of the interview, you won some titles with Mario Acosta,
Yes.
who is
So,
the yes, sure.
yeah. So I actually started dancing with David Cepeda. He was my David and Paulina were my coaches. So I started with them two, and then I competed salsa pro-am with David Cepeda. And our first competition was in Toronto, and then we went to the summit with that, and it was a salsa pro-am. And then the same year we competed as a professional cabaret at the World Latin Dance Cup. So we
Okay.
competed in Toronto. They used to have these like preliminaries for this World Latin Dance Cup hosted in Toronto. So we went there. We won that one, which got us like a free our flight covered for the World Latin Dance Cup. So then we attended the World Dance Cup in December, and then I did Team Canada, and shortly after that, I started dancing with Mario. Yes,
Yes. So you guys won second place. So vice
yeah,
champion salsa small team.
small team. Yeah, at the summit. Yes.
So how did you start dancing? I saw you started with, I think you started with ballet.
Yes, so since the age of 7, I started ballet, and then my whole career was like, I was in a competitive program, and then I joined a professional program here at the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. And then later on in like 2013, I went to New York City for a teacher training program, for ballet. And then it was kind of at the age of like, it was shortly after that, my dad took me to a congress in Montreal, and I was just like mesmerized by the dancing, and then I shortly after that, that summer, that's when I decided to do the switch to salsa.
Oh, wow. Wasn't it a big move from
It
ballet
was a
to
big
Latin?
move. It was a big move. To be honest with you, I always grew up with salsa because my dad had a dance studio, and I would see the salsa, but I was never really in it. It just looked so much fun, and like the music, and it was such a different atmosphere that I just wanted to to join it. Yeah.
How the idea of a first competition came?
To be honest with you, it was David's idea. So when I went to Montreal to train with both him and Paulina, he then presented the idea of competing, and I was like, I don't think so. And then my dad got so excited. He's like, yes, yes, yes. And I'm like, okay. So our first competition, I believe I went in summer, like it was like in August or July, and then we competed in October in Toronto. So it was a very like quick that I think I didn't even have time to process all of it. So it was very exciting. Then when we got to Toronto, I remember we did the pro-am. We made it to the finals, and it was like on stage, and I remember I was just like, oh my god, it was just so exciting. And then yeah, it was a cool transition.
What was the first competition you won? Was it this one?
Yeah, it was the pro-am at the at the Toronto. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this one
Yeah,
you could go to the summit after that?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So basically, it was actually a very short-lived because I started salsa like it was like July, August, and then October we went to Toronto, and then right after that it was Summit. So it was like pretty like back to back.
In salsa directly.
Yeah, and then that same year I competed
In
in
bachata.
professional cabaret with David.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
It was very crazy. I kind of wish I would have stayed in the amateur a little bit longer, but after this, our competition pro-am, I was told I couldn't compete in the amateur division anymore. And like I understand because I had a lot of training, so they're like, it's not really fair in amateur. So, and then David wanted to do a project in bachata cabaret, so I said, okay, let's do it. So it was like that same year. It was just like 1 year of like, yeah.
Lot of changes. How do you remember the preparation you did for those competitions? How many hours per week you were
Oh,
dancing?
Yeah, it was actually kind of crazy because I live here in Winnipeg and David lived in Montreal. So we didn't live together. So when I would go to Montreal, it would be, like 2, 3 hours in the morning, and then I would go home, eat, rest, and then it would be like 2, 3 hours in the evening. And it was like that every single day. And we would try and book performances as many as we could, like every week if possible, to try and perform it as much as we can. But it was definitely a challenge because we don't live in the same city. So when I would come back home, it would go 2, 3 weeks without training. And then when we see each other, it would be like, so it was definitely a challenge. The same thing it was when we competed in a professional cabaret. We were still in different cities, so we didn't have all year together. And the same challenge occurred when I started partnering with Mario because he was in Edmonton and I was in Winnipeg. So it was always like, yeah.
How did you maintain your training and level at distance?
I was constant with my ballet classes. So even though I stopped training competitively and professionally in ballet, I was maintaining going to ballet classes. It was like the only way to maintain myself, um, you know, especially with like the tricks and the turns. It's very different, but I'm like, I think what kept it like made it easier was the fact that I was constantly with my ballet classes. Yeah.
Okay. During your year's competition, because I think now you're a competitor coach, but you made a break
Yeah. We're on a break right now.
in competition. But did you at that time did you train? Did you have any other sports more than dancing for preparing?
Yeah, so like with Mario, he was the one that introduced me to like CrossFit. So we would go to the gym and do like different training because that actually would help for tricks, like for like the body. And then I always maintain the ballet. I think that's a great one to keep the body, top notch. And then we would do sometimes I would go to the pool and swimming for like cardio and conditioning. Yeah, that one was a
Okay.
hard one. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially because I didn't have a partner here all the time. I had to find a way of, it's very different dancing by yourself than dancing with a partner. And then, by myself, I can't turn myself, I can't do myself the trick. So I had to do something to like kind of keep up with that cardio. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Do you remember? Okay, you are the first dancer mentioning swimming, but do you remember what kind of training you were doing at the swimming pool?
It would just be like running laps.
Okay. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a very hard transition for me from going from like ballet to salsa, just because ballet, even though it's very demanding on the body, it's a very different type of dancing than salsa. And I just felt like I had a hard time keeping up because also I was like, go, 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 and the turns and the tricks and this. And I was like hypervent. I was always like, oh my goodness, like I am fit. I'm like able to dance. So that transition was hard. And I remember my gym at that time used to have a pool. And I remember like David actually kind of had said, like, like go around some laps, like it might help. And then I was like, okay, it does help because that's, like, yeah, so that helped me a little bit with that. Hmm.
Okay. Oh, you just passed yeah, I'm the world champion of the World Wrestling Community, but how did you react? What happened? Do you have any stories beyond this competition about your
Yeah,
winning?
to be honest with you, so salsa was so new to me. So when I went to Montreal and we started practicing, and then he's like, "Okay, we're competing in Toronto," and I'm like, "Okay, great." And then he had told me that because we had competed in a heats competition where it's like social dancing and the like pro-am,
Yeah.
he had told me that it was all one score. So they basically judge both, and then you get rated on both scores. That was a lie. He just said that to encourage me to learn how to social dance because I didn't know how to social dance. So I remember I was going out every single night in Montreal, social dancing as much as I could because like we were competing in two, and he wanted me to social dance in two, and I was like, I don't know how to social dance also in two. And so I was out every single night social dancing as much as you can imagine. I remember we get to Toronto and we do the Heath competition. I get my award, and I was like, I thought this was gonna be with like our pro-am showcase. And he's like, oh yeah, I will, I will. And then I'm like, okay. And then we competed like the pro-am, and then we're getting separate award. And I'm like, this wasn't a one comp. Like they were both together. And he's like, I know, but he's like, you needed the push to learn how to social dance. And he's like, if I would have told you that it was just a show, you wouldn't have. So I appreciate that because that really pushed me to like learn how to social dance and like just threw myself out there. Um, and then I remember in Summit, it was I showed up and I was like so nervous because we had really only done, Toronto. We would do shows as much as we could. But again, it was a big challenge because we were not living in the same city. And he still had projects with Paulina because they were still dancing at that time. So like sometimes he would have to be gone on trips with her. And then it's like, but when they would come back, we would train. So we would go like long times with no training. So getting to Summit, it was definitely scary because I'm like, most of these couples live in the same city. They train every day for like months and months and months, and we didn't have that really. So I remember I got like my first new salsa costume. I was so excited to like, the diamonds and like all the sparkles. um, and I remember I was like looking at everyone and I was just so excited to perform. I remember we competed and I was like, I was on such a high. I don't know. It was such a different feeling just because like ballet is so proper. You perform and it's like your clap, but like in the salsa, it's like you feed off the crowd. Like you get to the shine sport and like people are screaming. You're like, oh my gosh, it was such a different feeling. That yeah, it was definitely. I mean, I'll never forget that. And then when we won the first place, I was so excited. I was like, oh yeah, it was definitely a fun moment.
What was your position at the World Latin Dance Cup with your new category in bachata?
Second place in pro cabaret.
You're vice champion World Latin Dance Cup 2016 then.
Yes, and that was that's my very first competition as a pro. Yeah.
That's amazing. You just start. Okay, I have a very wet question, but how do you coach your students when they don't get to have the same story than you? I mean, I don't diminish your work because you work for so hard with ballet, but you still came with this background of ballet. You start
Yeah.
competition and you don't just, but you win. I guess
Yeah.
you have some, I guess it's not the story of everyone in your students. So
I
how
know.
do you manage that and how do you support them emotionally?
To be honest with you, and I think that's so important. That's for like, even if you ask any of my students, like I really enforce the ballet in them because I tell them it really goes a long way. Like, like for me, at first I remember I didn't want to look like a ballerina dancing, but then I was like, you know what, it really does it cleans out like, the lines, the turns, like it really facilitates it. And like I have some students that I've had since they were like little, like 6, 7 years old, and they've never taken ballet before, but they've taken my program, and now they're like 16, 17. They're competing with our um, team, which they won first place this year at the Canada Salsa Congress,
Congratulations.
amateur salsa team. And like lots of them, they, like now, like when I look at them, I'm like, okay, like I made it easier for them. They have the legs, they have the feet, they have the turns, they have that technique behind them. So I know at first they don't enjoy it. They're like, why are we doing this? Like, this is not salsa, but I'm like, it'll actually help a lot like along the way.
Mhm. And what about the emotional downs they might leave when they don't just straight away win world champions title?
That, and that's a hard one. And even I feel like, it's crazy because I used to compete a lot in ballet. Like I would do about like 7 competitions a year. Like it was, and I'm such a perfectionist, and like, like I would be like, I want to win, like I want to win. And it's like, I would always going for the win. But I think it's important sometimes to not win for you to be like, oh, okay, like, like I gotta keep up working hard. So I always tell my students, I'm like, even if, like in Toronto, they were in tears when they won like the amateur division. Um, and I was so happy for them. And then I tell them like, like every competition, someone's hungry for that first prize. Everybody's hungry for that first prize. So I'm like, it's always who's working the hardest, who's working the hardest. And I think that mentality is great because it keeps them on their toes and wanting to like, keep working hard. And like, sometimes it's crazy. I have my own studio here and I'll get like my students are like, hey, can we come in at 6? And like, they come in on their own time and they practice on their own time, which is great. But I'm like, they're so hungry for it. And I'm happy to be able to give them the space to practice there and like to keep that hunger alive.
Mhm. Okay. So how did the transition from David Zepeda to Mario Costa
So
happen?
So basically, after me and David competed in the pro cabaret, Um, I wasn't really dancing. Like I was dancing with him, but like he was doing still like, his things with Paulina. And then ironically, so many people kept telling me like, "Oh, you and Mario should dance together." And I'm like, "Who's Mario? I didn't even know Mario." And then he was hearing the same thing. He's like, "You and Anna would be like the perfect dance couple. Like you have ballroom and she has like ballet training." And like people kept, I kept hearing this Mario Acosta. I've never met him my whole life. And then it just so happened that we went to an event in Saskatoon and he was there. And I remember like we approached each other and he's like, "Hi, I'm Mario. I'm Anna." I'm like, "I've heard so much about you." He's like, "Me too." And he's like, "People keep saying we need to do a dance project together." And I'm like, "I know." And I remember that same weekend we said, "Well, let's do a performance here." We're like, "Okay." So literally in like a day, we put a show together. We performed it. We grabbed like it was like it was just like, okay, well, people keep saying we should do a project. And then that's kind of how it started. After that, we started, and like honestly, I had the most fun with him. We got to travel so much and like dance. And then what was great is that he had such a, he had the ballroom background,
Mhm.
which kind of like influenced on me, and I had the ballet. So it was such a great yeah, duo.
Match.
Yes, it was. I'm so sad he moved to Australia, but
I know. I think you started to dance together before he became a world champion soloist.
yeah,
I think when I was already following you at that time, and you only competed in salsa, right? With Mario.
yes.
Okay.
With
Why this choice?
um, so to be honest with you, I felt so because I jumped right away into the competition, I felt like I needed more salsa training and I wanted that. And like Mario was so knowledgeable in salsa that I had told him like, and he was great in that sense. Like he was very patient and like I just wanted to know more of salsa. To me, it was crazy to be like, oh, like I won these championships, but I'm like, I'm still so new to it. Like I still want to learn more. I want to understand more. And he didn't really compete in bachata, which was fine to me because I just wanted to be more in the salsa at that point. And so it was great for us because I felt like he kind of he kind of did that career with me, whereas like I learned so much from him. We're traveling. We ended up in Puerto Rico. He had a solo competition, the Salsa Open, that he won that year. And so afterwards we stayed in Puerto Rico and trained with Tito and Tamara for a little bit. And then so like it was just so nice doing that with him because I'm like I had him that, and then he would be like, "It's okay, like, we're in this together." And like we were teaching workshops together and I'm like, "Mario, I don't know." I felt like I wasn't that confident. He's like, this, like it's okay. So it was really like that was really important for me because he really was patient with that.
Do you remember the titles you won with Mario?
We didn't really compete that much. We competed once in like I think it was like in Miami, was like the hustle
Okay.
yeah, like the hustle congress that we hosted there, like Billy used to host it. And then we competed once here in Toronto. I think it was the salsa category, and then it was just the team. So what happened is that kind of when our partnership happened was at the same time that Team Canada happened.
Mhm.
So we kind of had to make a decision. Do we dedicate our time to us or to the team?
Mhm.
Because we were in the same city, right? So that year we kind of said, okay, let's do this Team Canada project. I think it's going to be good for both of us. We're going to learn from so many different couples across Canada. And because we weren't together, like every other couple in Team Canada lived in the same city, right? Except for me and Mario. So we kind of felt the pressure of like we had to keep up because we don't have the ability to train all the time.
Mhm.
So yeah, so every time we did get to be together, we would focus it a little bit on the Team Canada at that time.
When I think about Team Canada, one more time, I was already following you at that time. Adeno Samantha didn't do the showcase, right? Because I think Adeno broke his feet. Is it possible?
Yeah, that was in Saskatoon. Yes, yes, yes.
Oh my, that's this is the kind of story I like from beyond the competition. What's happening behind the scenes? So what
Oh, you know
happened?
what? Team Canada was like a crazy time because you had this partnership from Montreal, Adriano and Samantha from Montreal. You had Patrick and Scarlett from Vancouver, Hilton Regan from here in Winnipeg, and then you had me from Winnipeg, and then Mario from Montreal. So it's like, oh, sorry, that's the clock.
All right.
And um, it was really hard because it's like we're trying to do a team performance with couples from all different cities. So when we would get together, was something, let me tell you. Like it was definitely, it was great because we got to learn so much from each other, and then, but yeah, it was crazy. Like I remember the first show we did, it was like a disaster because we like, you're putting four complete different couples on the same stage, same choreo. It was like we were not following each other. So it took a lot for us to like then be like, okay, we have to move as one. Like, even though we're four different couples, we don't have all the time to train together. So at Summit, it was like, people were like screaming for us. And I remember that feeling that we're like, wow, we like play second. This is crazy because we're not all from the same city. Like this is a quite a
Mhm.
project. Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about your coaching? How do you help your couple to get ready? How many hours of training do you expect from them? How do you help them manage their stress, etc.?
Yeah.
Yes, because we didn't mention, but this is a metaverse because Anna, you're the coach of Andrea, which we
Yes.
already did the interview, so everyone get to know each other. It's a very small world.
It is a very small world. So, with like, for example, like Andrea and the team, I have them come into the studio with me at least 3 times a week. On Tuesdays, they're usually there from like 6 to like 10:30, 11. Thursdays as well. And then on a different day of the week, I have them there for like 4 hours. So they do like it's quite a bit of time at a time. Now they do come in on their own time. Let's say, like, if they want to work on their solo. So that would be like a one-on-one practice. And that's so I would honestly say most of my students are at the studio about like 5 to 6 times a week. And like I said, sometimes it's not even with me. Like I'm like, I'll see them like 4 times a week and then they come in on their own.
Mhm.
Like it's crazy. Like, like I'll have like Andrea, for example, she'll message me and she's like, hey, I'm not at school today. Can I come in at the studio? And I'm like, yep, like studio's available, and she'll come in on her own time.
Mhm.
And then I'll have sometimes what helps a lot that they, after their performances, they always show me their videos and then we'll go through it, like some corrections that need to work here and there. So then they're able to go in on their own time and they know what to work on as well.
Mhm.
Um, and as for the rest of the team, it's pretty much the same. Like they all do that too. Like they have their mandatory classes that they have to take on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then the team practice that follows up with it. We do have like conditioning with it. And yeah, it does change a little bit once we're closer to a competition. We do increase that. Like I have them coming probably like 4 times. So they're literally there like 7 days a week. But yeah. And then, I do really reinforce the um I was in a very so when I was in the professional school, I was there like 7 days a week. It was very different. I was very young. Like everybody knows how ballet can be. Like, it's really hard on the body, it's very hard mentally, it's very hard. So I try and even though I'm really hard on them and like you're so scary when you're like at the studio and I'm like I have to be. I'm like I'm trying to push you guys and I'm like, I always remind them that I'm like, I'm like, when I'm hard on you in class, it's not because I'm trying to be mean or I'm trying to, push you down. I'm like, it's because I know you're able to do it. And so I'm like, I'm there to like push you. So I,
Mhm.
I do try and remind them that I'm like, it's not coming in it's just, I need you guys to do better. And I'm like, I know you can do better. So I'm like, I know if I push you, the results will be there. hmm And then people like, like Andrea, that like, she's been in it for a while. Like she loves the push. Like she wants, you can see that they want the push. They want to, even like, you should see my like little kids. I have a little competitive kids that are like around like 7. They went to Toronto this year. They won. And like, they they work harder when I'm like pushing them. Like it's like
Mhm.
if I like slow down, they're kind of like sleeping around. I'm like, okay, like you guys want me to be like that, but I'm like, so yeah.
I think even the adult one, we are like that because my coaches, we are all adults in the team. And when they are not hard, we are not hard. And when they are, we're like,
Exactly. So
ah.
like, and I feel like you get that. It's like, and I'm the same. Like to be honest with you, I'm the worst at practicing by myself. I'm like, I don't like. I need someone there like holding accountable because I'm like, otherwise I'm just like, it's okay. So I'm like, yeah.
Yes. And what about the stress managing part?
Stress is a hard one because I feel it in the team sometimes where it's like when we're getting around competition time, like everybody has so much on their plate, they have their team, they have their solos, their duos, the pro-ams. You have, some of my students that are in university as well. And I try to have this like open relationship, and like, like if there's something, like a certain behavior happening in studio, that like, I will approach them later on and be like, hey, is everything okay? Like, does this need to, to kind of have that open communication. I do find that I've always tried to make it to my students. This was like my teacher used to put that in my head very clearly, that I tell my students, I'm like, sometimes we're so stressed, at work or at school or whatever is going on outside of, you know, your dance world, that I'm like, but when you come to the studio, I'm like, leave that outside the door. I'm like, try and like escape from it. And like that was like huge for me. Like I know like for my dance career, like, like there was so much going on, but like when I loved going to the studio because it was kind of like my time where I would forget about everything. It was like my time that I was in like my own world. Everything was perfect. It was like I love, and like sometimes, like I remind that to the students. I'm like, like when you're at the studio, this is your time. Like I'm like, you can forget about everything else that's going on in the world, and this is like a you time. I'm like, I want you to enjoy it. And some people enjoy the, the hard work and like their minds off of it. Like, it's different for everybody. I'm like, I just want that to be the space at the studio. Like it's literally your time. Just forget about the rest. So I think that does help. Um, it definitely gets crazy when we are at the Congress because there's so much going on. There's like tears happening. This is happening. But then I remind them, and I'm like, you guys, this is all part of the process. Like, it's okay. And like, and then I tell them too, I'm like, you worked so hard all year for this. So I'm like, I get that we're, under the nerves and everything, but I'm like, enjoy it, because I'm like, you're gonna miss it when when you don't do it. Yeah.
What about how do you manage the unfairness perceived in competition with your students?
Yeah, that's hard. That's definitely a hard one. And I do have a talk every single time before a competition. I have a talk with the team, and and I tell them, as much as like, you have your judges and like you have, everybody's getting judged on the same thing. I'm like, we're all technically doing such different choreos that it's hard to compare, apples with oranges or banana, like it's all very different.
Mm.
So, I tell them, like, I'm like, one competition you might do great, because, and then one competition you won't. And I'm like, but that doesn't define you as a dancer. Nor does it, make you a better or worse dancer. I might take it as a, learning curve. Like, like you watch your results, watch where you maybe lacked, and then like, take from it, and like, just don't get discouraged. And that's hard because, it's hard to not get discouraged if you're not doing, good in a certain competition. But, and that's with everything. Like I remember even in ballet, we would, like one year, I remember with our team, we were dancing like, and it was like an Arabian theme that we had going on, and the judge didn't like Arabian theme. So I remember like anything that was Arabian didn't do good that year. And we're like, okay, well, like, how would we have known that? Right. So I always tell my student that I'm like, it's very different. It's very good to have like my coach used to tell me, like, put eggs in different baskets, like, so you don't know. Cause I'm like, if you put all your eggs in one basket, if that judge doesn't like that specific style, or like, then you're screwed. Right. So I try and do that too with their choreos, to have like so many different elements in it, and and it to be different from their solo, from their duo, to this, like that, so that they do have kind of more opportunities. Mm-hmm.
What would you like to know the mainstream or the public know about the life of being a competitor? What's happening behind 2 minutes of show?
It's really crazy, because I feel like, you know, I know, like, for me, you have people forget all the hard work, like, the blisters, the blood, the bruises, the injuries, even as a competitor, and like, like someone that's doing so good, you sometimes, my students are like, you get doubts, or like, oh, is this good enough, or is that, and I always go back to, that feeling on stage where I'm like, you feel like you're on top of the world. And like, I know for me, when I get on stage, I'm like, I forget about everything. Like, I'm like, everything. I'm like, I'm not even paying attention to the audience. Like, sometimes I finish and I'm like, it was like a dream. Like, you just forget the moment. And I just want people to know that it's like, it's a lot of work that, goes through a lot of like mental, physical. There's a lot of sacrifices that are getting done. And it's just to support each other, because it's really a lot goes on, a lot. I see it in my students too. And I'm like, some of these kids, I'm like, they're going to university, they're coming there, they're doing their homework in the lobby, or like in the middle of practice, they'll be like, I have to finish this one thing. And I'm like, okay, go finish it. And they're like submitting homework and they're like, okay, back to practice. And I'm like, wow, I'm like, this, like, they're really, a lot goes on. And I'm like, and it's, we get so caught up and we like, oh, we we support, or sometimes we get so excited with the first place that everybody goes to the first place. But I'm like, you know what? Everybody, not just the first place, like second place, third place, fourth, they all had to go through a little sacrifice. So it's like, you don't just praise the first place. It's like, yes, of course, you praise the first place. Like, they did great. But I'm like, everyone went through all those sacrifices. Everybody worked so hard. So yeah, I think that would be important, that it's like to really support everyone, because it's a lot of hard work goes on through that.
I agree with that. I agree so much with it that I am going to add something. I
Yeah.
do the interview of champions, first places, but to be honest, if I could, I would even interview the last one, because no one can understand better competitor than another one. It's just,
Yeah.
I want so much to give the visibility to the discipline, and
Discipline,
who's
of course.
better than the winner. So for now, I just interview the first one, but I agree with you. Even the last one put exactly the same work, and I have to pay. It's like even in soccer,
Of
they
course, you have,
put the
and here's the
interview.
thing. Of course, and here's the thing. It's a competition, so there's always a winner, right? And like, absolutely, I agree with you 100%. But I see it, and I never used to view it like that until I became a teacher, because at the end of the day, at a competition, I have students that are winning, and I have students that are not winning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it really made me open my eyes, that I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, how do I? It's so hard, because I'm so happy for that student that won,
Yeah.
but I'm like, I, so I'd never thought of it like that until I became a coach. And then I was put in that position. I'm like, oh, I'm like, it was the first time I didn't know what to do, because it's like, you want to celebrate because you have your first place winner. And I'm like, I want them to know I'm so proud of them. And, like, I'm so happy. But
Mm-hmm.
then you have students that didn't win. And I don't want them to get discouraged. And I want them to keep, being motivated. So it's, yeah, that was the first time that it put me in that position, that I was like, oh, like, yeah.
And it may also be so tricky, because when you have a winner who technically win the first place, and the one who didn't win, but you saw the evolution and you're so happy for them, but they just see that they lost, and you're
They
just,
lost. And that's the
oh,
thing that I'm like, I know, and it's like, it's heartbreaking. And then, it's so sad when I see students like getting so discouraged. And I'm like, it's so hard, because, like me, for example, when I started dancing, I was like 7, and I started in ballet, jazz, and I was not your top student. Like, I really wasn't. Like, I was just like, whatever. I didn't, yeah. And then a few years later, it was like, well, the following year, I competed in ballet. And then, I had the hyperextension, I had the feet. So it was like, that obviously helps in ballet. Then it was kind of later on, after I had left the professional program, that I came back to competition. And I remember I was like, oh, I became more of like your star student. Like, I was competing in ballet, in jazz, in contemporary, and I was placing in all of them. Like, but I'm like, it was so foreign to me, because I'm like, I wasn't like that. I'm like, it took so many years for me to get to that. And sometimes I want students to understand that it's like, sometimes, like, you don't just show up at your first competition and win it. Like, sometimes it takes like 10 competitions, 15 competitions. There's so many. And I'm like, and that's okay. And I'm like, there is some people that like the one competition they win, but I'm like, it's not like that for everybody. So I'm like, it's such a different path for everyone. And it's so hard for all dancers to understand that, because it's like everyone has their own path in their own career, right? And like their own timing. And it's just so hard, because sometimes, you may have started with a student at the same time, and then one's doing more, and then like it, but it's like, it's hard for them to understand. It's okay, like, you'll have your time to shine. It's just like, give it time. Like, yeah.
well, thank you so much. I have a small game to close the interview.
Okay.
It's a game we did in our dance school, and I thought, oh, my next athlete, I'm going to do it. So it's this or that. So you get to choose. There are 5 questions.
Okay.
I just wrote them. Give me 1 second. So the first one is well, I think I have the answer, but Cuban style or Puerto Rican style?
Puerto Rican style.
Dancing in heels or dancing with baskets?
Heels.
do you prefer to dance as social with an unknown dancer or with someone you already know?
That's a hard one. I would say someone I don't know with a new dancer. Yeah,
Shines or turns, multiple turns?
multiple turns.
Salsa romántica o salsa dura?
Ooh, romántica.
And the last one, choreography or improvisation? Or
Well,
showcase.
that's a hard one, but
I
I'm
know.
gonna have to say choreography.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm so happy
So
we finally
much.
got to do it. Is there any question you would have liked to hear?
No, I think you covered all of them. I think you had really good questions that I'm like, I didn't even think you were gonna ask. And I'm like, oh, this is a good question.
Well, thank you so much for the people who want to follow Anna's her journey as a coach and her dance school, of course. All the information, Instagram, Facebook will be on the bio. See you. A pronto. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.